Call the December 5th, Calaveras Council of Governments meeting to order. Our first item is the call to order and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial and will be acted upon by the council at one time without discussion. Any council member, staff member, or interested party may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for further discussion. Do we have any items by the council wishing to be pulled? Do we have any public interested in pulling any consent agenda items?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Consent agenda items 1 through 5 have been moved by Councilmember Tofinelli, seconded by Councilmember Mills. Murides. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 7-0. Our next order of business is public comment. Public comment shall be limited to 5 minutes per person and to items that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council and not on the posted agenda. Do we have any public comment this evening? Seeing none, item number 7. Presentation by Richardson and Company with request for acceptance by the council of the fiscal year 2017-18 Annual Transportation Development Act audit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce Mr. Brian Nash. He's partner with Richardson and Company. He will be presenting the COG fiscal year 17-18 TDA financial audit.
Good evening. You should have from us an agenda that I'll go over, and there's 2 letters. One is addressed to the board of directors and council members and management, which is our management letter. It has some recommendations for internal control improvements. And then there's a second letter that's a letter of required disclosures to a governing body. My outline covers everything in that letter. And the last thing you should have is a draft financial statement that once you approve it, it will be issued. So tonight we're just presenting the council's financial statements. We also perform audits for the County of Calaveras Transit Fund and City of Angels non-transit fund. Those are not ready at this point. So one thing I always point out is management's responsible for the financial statements, and we're responsible to provide our opinion based on our audit. The opinion is clean on page 1 of the financial statements, so no modifications. Now I'd like to start with the management letter. Last year we brought forth an issue related to internal controls over financial reporting. I'm pleased to report that that's been taken care of. You hired a bookkeeper that really cleaned up the accounting. There were some entries still that we needed to post to make the financial statements in accordance with general accepted accounting principles, but I think that was more just of a learning curve. There's a couple more accounts that need to be set up, and things are definitely improving over the last several years that we did the audit. So in the past, we reported a significant deficiency in financial reporting. That's no longer reported in the financial statements. It's now no deficiencies. Another thing I brought up in the management letter is there is a deficit of $42,000 in the STA fund. 2 years ago, there was a reduction of the money promised by the state, and the allocation went out with that number in it. They didn't notify the council that they were going to pull back some of that money until everything was done. Financial statements of the county were done with that number accrued, and the financial statements of the COG were done with that money accrued. So the council stuck with that allocation, and to reduce the deficit, that would be a reduction in the current year allocation. So if, for example, there's $200,000 of revenue, you would just approve $42,000 less than that to eliminate that deficit, and so that'll square up the fund balance. So unfortunately, that's kind of a hangover from the state's actions that they took a couple years ago. And so we've been talking to management about that one. There's one other issue we didn't consider it to be a significant issue, but there was a revision in the allocation of pedestrian and bicycle funds. They're reprogrammed to go to the COG for a particular project. And this is just a reminder that when that happens, there really should be a resolution passed showing the new purpose. And so that didn't happen. It was approved as part of the budget, but there really should be a separate resolution according to the Transportation Development Act. So that's all we had in our management letter this year, which is a vast improvement over the past. So really did some good improvements this year.
Good job, staff.
All right, so I'd like to just point out a few numbers in the financial statements, a few of the significant disclosures, and then I'll end my presentation. So on page 6 of the financial statements, there's what's called management's discussion and analysis. It's like a executive summary of the financial statements. And so if you just wanted to get a quick look at what's happening, that's a good place to start. I'll walk through a couple of these numbers. Cash increased $161,000. That was because there's an increase in payables, so there are some payments that were made after year end that were really related to the current year, so higher cash, higher payables at the end of the year. There's restricted cash for Potemsa, $356,000. That's for bus stops and vehicle location system, and there's $74,000 at the end of the year that was received for bus stop lighting. So there were some expenses incurred during the year, but the payments weren't made until after the year. So there's a separate payable of $44,000 of Cal OES money to the county and $13,000 of Potemsa to the county after year end. So some of that money was spent. It just didn't. The check just didn't go out till after the end of the year. Pension liability, it increased from $72,000 to $94,000. And that's a result of CalPERS reducing the discount rate they use to discount the liability. The higher the discount rate, the lower the net present value of the liability. So they reduced that discount rate, so the liability increased a little bit. They've been doing that. They have a plan to reduce that discount rate over 3 years down to 7%. So there's still another reduction coming that should be in the current year. There's deferred inflows and outflows you'll see on the page there. Those are also related to the pension plan. There's certain amounts that are deferred over the service life of the employees if there's changes in assumptions or various things. I'm not going to get into too much detail on that, but so unrestricted net position, which is the spendable money, increased $98,000. And that's mainly due to the timing of the payments. The assets increased, kind of resulted in that increase in unrestricted net position. If you turn to page 7, the income statement, it shows the changes there. Grants are down. There were some grants for the Wagon Trail, Highway 49 Gateway Corridor Study, and Regional Transportation Plan Update in the previous year that increased grants, and so those are declining. Those declined in 17-18. The expenses declined similarly. And now I'd like to point out a few things in the footnotes. There is a disclosure of the new Special District Risk Management Authority insurance, page 25 of the financial statements. Just discloses the terms of the insurance there. There's also an operating lease summary there on page 25 that spills over onto page 26, and it shows that the lease is going to be up in a couple years. There is a new accounting standard that's been issued that'll be implemented in the year ended June 30, 2021, and leases are going to become liabilities on the balance sheet. Currently, leases are just disclosed in a footnote. You pay each year and expense it. But after this Governmental Accounting Standard Board Statement number 87 is implemented, there'll be an asset, an intangible asset, right to use asset on the asset side of the balance sheet, and the liability on the liability side of the balance sheet. So that's going to be coming in a couple years. Page 31, we disclose the new transit JPA that was formed, and the responsibility of the council, or the involvement in the council has with that authority. And we've talked a little bit about the accounting for the new JPA, and we decided it's probably good to set up a new entity inside of the QuickBooks for that. Keep it separate from the COGS numbers, keep it clean. So that's something we talked about during the audit. There is also a disclosure of the exchange agreement, the congestion mitigation or quality funds, the CMAQ funds that were going to expire with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and how they'll give the money back with a different source in 2020. So that was kind of an interesting solution to a problem. Okay. Page 32 is the budget and actual summary. And the top is without carryover amounts in the revenues. On the bottom section, it shows with the carryover budget added to revenues what those numbers would be. So at the bottom, there's $350,000 of carryover that existed. So in the top section, the revenues are under budget and the expenses are under budget. And I think that's just basically timing of projects. There is salaries and benefits. You can see the reduction there due to the transportation planner position being vacant. Keep moving here. On page 35, those are the local transportation, state transit assistant, regional surface transportation program funds that we report in private purpose trust funds. On the income statement on those funds, page 35, you'll see that the LTF fund, there was a change in net position of $10,000 negative, so reduction of net position. There was a true-up that was accrued that hasn't happened yet to the county to wind up the amount that they've spent through the date that the JPA was established. I think that was about $94,000, and I think there's been a little bit of a adjustment to that number after we accrued that number, a few $1,000s, I think. Let's see, the STA, you'll see that deficit I've already talked about that needs to be dealt with in the future claim, or in the future allocation to eliminate that deficit of $41,897, $42,000. The RSTP fund, there was 2 years worth of revenue received. Usually you get one allocation towards the end of the year. I guess there was 2 allocations received before the end of the year. So revenues are up a little bit. And the only expenses was an allocation to the council. So the city and county haven't made any claims of that money in years, apparently. I hadn't realized. It just keeps growing. There's $1.6 million to spend there. It's available for street projects, from what I understand. So that's something to keep in mind. Anybody have any questions on that? Otherwise, a couple required disclosures and I'll get out of your hair. So one of the things we're required to disclose to a governing body is what numbers are estimated in the financial statements. So the fair value of the county pool that the cash and investments is invested in, that's an estimate. The amount of qualifying expenses that are incurred under grants is estimated. The grantor could come back and disallow some of those costs. The compensated absences, which is the vacation and sick leave liability, and especially the current portion of that is estimated. And then the pension liability, That's based on an actuarial valuation that CalPERS performs. And the lies for capital asset depreciation. All assets are depreciated for the COG. So those are the estimated numbers. And final disclosure, required disclosure, the audit was, scope of the audit was consistent with our engagement letter. We had no difficulties in performing the audit, no disagreements with management, and no conditions on our retention, so no accounting treatments that were required before we were rehired. And so with that, that's my formal presentation. Be happy to discuss anything else in more detail if you'd like me to.
All right. Council, any questions on the item? Councilmember Rolls.
Mr. Nash, I know we've talked before,
Yes.
and I consider this to be nothing more than a need for fine-tuning at this point. I think you concur,
Yes,
and that this is a substantial improvement over where we were 2 years ago.
definitely.
So
Definitely.
I appreciate the effort that the staff has put into making the necessary corrections, and I look forward to even a better audit next time.
Yes.
Any other council comment?
Just, again, good job, Melissa, Amber, staff. We keep getting better and better at this. A few years ago, but we had some problems because of, but we've gotten through them and now we're getting better. And just a great job. Very, very good job. Very good report.
Is there an action to this? Do we need to accept it?
Yeah, acceptance.
Is there any public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary Caldwell, Valley Springs. I want to refer you to page 60. In paragraph 3, it talks about unassigned funds in the amounts of roughly 133,000 and 99,000 is the other one.
The package-
And, I
Are you
beg your
talking
pardon?
about package number 60 because the report?
Packet page 60.
Yeah,
Yeah.
package.
Page 22 of the audited financial statements. Thank you. That's what it's referring to.
My question is, those two unassigned amounts, 230,000 roughly, are they interest-bearing?
Would you like me to answer that?
Sure.
Yes, they are.
Yes.
Yes, the answer is
They
yes.
are? Okay. On page 62, it refers to an investment committee. In paragraph 1, performs regulatory oversight for its pool. Who is that?
I can
Who is the investment committee?
explain.
It's at the county. When the council entered into a contract with the county treasurer, we opted to follow their policies at the county. So there's an investment policy, there's an investment report given annually to the board of supervisors, and our funding is held within their treasury.
I can also explain that that is
So
a
who is it?
quarterly, there's a meeting quarterly. I am on that committee.
I beg your
And
pardon?
I say there is a quarterly meeting with that committee. I am on that committee.
Oh, you're on the, that's one
Yes, sir.
person.
And also the school district is on the committee, along with the treasurer, the tax collector, and I'm trying to think, the auditor.
Yeah, there's school money is invested in that, through that
Correct.
committee, and there's other
Special
Districts.
Like lighting districts and road
Yeah.
districts.
Veterans
that are invested
districts,
in
Right.
fire.
So it's a big pool. We put a-
Okay, I was just wondering what the return is to the COG on its investments.
We just received a report from
It's-
Barbara, so you can go on
Yeah.
the treasurer's website at the county and look for that financial statement. For
You
that.
don't know?
Not a fan.
It's been,
Do you know what the
the
return is?
last report was 2.18.
Gary, you were just, the question was just answered by
The
Councilmember
last
Mills.
report was 2.18.
Yeah.
2.18%?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but sir, you must understand, we're limited on how we can invest those funds. We can only go low investments in safe investments by law.
GFOA,
understand.
GFOA requires it to be safety, security, and liquidity at all costs.
Correct.
And the fourth or fifth paragraph now talks about credit risk. It says the county investment pool does not have a rating provided by a nationally recognized statistical rating organization. And my question is, why not?
Because it's not required, but those bonds and those mutual funds, et cetera, that we invest in have to have a minimum rating of a AA or better.
Correct.
So the investment pool, the amount of money that is invested by this committee is not,
It is not required by law to have a rating, but at the same time, those instruments that we engage in are required to be rated.
don't you think it'd be a good idea to have
It's
investment?
not required by law.
I didn't ask if it was required by law. I asked if it was a good idea.
No.
It's not a good idea. Okay. And under capital assets, it only lists an automobile, I should say. And it says furniture and equipment, and it's blank. Does that mean there's no value for the furniture and equipment that's in the office?
I'm pretty sure that the limit is $5,000, and currently we don't have any furniture that meets that threshold. It's all been depreciated,
So it has no value.
not on our financial statements.
Okay.
See, I'm just trying to
On the-
get bills rated at that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought Mr. Tofinelli was talking. Talking about the, on page 69, it talks about the OES monies. And it gives a balance of 73,000 roughly at the first of the past fiscal year. And then it says that council approved a reimbursement to the county for 44,000. Now, does that mean that the balance has been reduced by 44,000?
Yes.
it has.
The answer is
You're nodding
yes.
your head yes, so I guess it has, huh?
I said yes.
The date of the allocation to the county is after the end of the fiscal year, so it's a note to let you know that at the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, there was 74,000, but the September 5th reimbursement for 44,000 reduces that fund. So it's for information.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I appreciate Executive Director spending some time with me to go over previous items I had questions about with respect to the audit. Thank you.
Is there any further public comment? Is there any further council comment?
And Gary, I want to thank you for going through this and asking those questions. Because when people view this, if they had some questions similar to yours, they'll understand what's going on financially.
Well, and of course, you know, I'm not an accountant, I'm an engineer. Waiting for these is not easy for me.
No, you have valid questions.
Yeah, I would also concur that your questions are probably the first time in 2 years that someone has asked those questions of us.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
So the recommendation from staff is that we accept this fiscal year TDA audit and direct staff to submit the final documentation to the state controller. Do we have a motion to accept
Oh,
the
yeah.
TDA audit and submit the final documentation to the state controller?
I have a question. If we accept it, do we have to pay them? Or if we don't accept it, then we don't have to?
I think that'd be something in the contract we'd have to look at.
I'll move this item, Mr. Chair.
Second. Moved by Councilmember Tofinelli, seconded by Councilmember Muniz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Nash.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
The next item.
Okay.
I've been waiting for this one.
Our next agenda item is the citizen member appointment process. As this is a item where it is decided and voted on specifically and solely by the electeds of this board, that would be the 2 supervisorial members and the 2 city council members, I'm going to turn the gavel over to our vice chair to conduct this item.
Thank you.
You need
No,
to
I
go.
don't need the gavel, that's fine. So we will now begin the interview process and invite the applicant, and we have one applicant, to the podium. And if you might give us a brief presentation of interest and qualifications, that would be appreciated. We also have your letter of interest, and hopefully every person has had a chance to read it. So,
Okay.
it's
Hello,
board
my
work.
name is Justin Catalano. This is my 4th year participating in the COG. I thoroughly enjoy participating and contributing to this council. I would like to have another 2 years, and it should be an interesting time to see, certain projects getting completed and moving forward. And it's an interesting time for our transit organization with the restructuring. I'm glad to be a part of that, and I feel that my knowledge and experience in the transportation world is a benefit to not only this council but the citizens of the county who I'm representing, and taxpayers, to try to do this position the most efficiently that I possibly can.
Thank you. With that, I would open it up. Is there any questions of the elected members of the council regarding his application? Seeing none?
Might add one, but no.
Pardon me?
No, I did, might add one, but no.
Okay. Is there any public comment regarding this matter? Seeing none, I would call for a motion of whether or not to accept Mr. Catalano as the citizen member position to the COG.
A move.
Have a
I'll
motion?
second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. It was a
I
lot
now give-
easier this time around.
A lot more calmer situation. I now give the gavel back to the chair. Welcome back.
Congratulations, Justin.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got used to your face there, so.
Very good.
Next item is agenda item number 9, approving the allocation instructions for an additional fiscal year 17-18 LTF claim to the County Public Works Department in the amount of $97,514.39. Ms. Raggio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, attached is the claim by the county. This would be the final allocation to close out the transit account at the county. The auditor attached, or I have attached an email from the county auditor where she has requested approximately $97,000. About $2,600 of that is for a capital expense that wasn't requested for reimbursement, and then $94,000 is in operating costs that weren't covered. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Having a conversation with Amber earlier today, and I would make a motion to accept this, but the motion would have to be on record as stating that this would be the last, since they are claiming this is the last. If they find some invoice, then that's it. That this will be the final cutoff of accepting any invoices for transportation for the past years.
Yes.
So I will make the motion.
I was going to echo what you were saying is that we're not going to be surprised by any more invoices.
Yes,
From this.
and that if they have them, then they'll have to deal with, the county will have to deal with it themselves. But to move forward, and I will make the motion on those grounds to accept. I know you want to public comment, but,
Second. Okay, the motion has been moved by Councilmember Tofinelli and seconded by Councilmember Munides. Are there any further council comments? Is there public comment to board agenda number 9? Mr. Colwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gary Caldwell, Valley Springs, sort of futile now that the vote's been taken, but
The vote has
The
not been
vote has
taken.
not been taken.
oh, I'm sorry, I thought the vote was taken.
No, we just had a motion and a second, that's all. No vote.
Okay, thank you. I want to echo what was said by the council member Toffenelli and council member Mills. This is not the first year where this request for an extension has been granted. Now, I realize Public Works has been in a bit of an upheaval the last few years. But what caught my eye, besides the fact that they're in another item asking for a 90-day extension, was the fact that when it says background, 75% of the time passed as of April of 2018, and yet 5% of the money was collected. Something wrong there. Also, if you look onto page 93, with respect to this claim, item number 1, it says, claimant assures that it has submitted a satisfactory independent fiscal audit. Well, they haven't. They're asking for a 90-day extension tonight. So they can't certify that.
I can clarify.
And so the audit has not been done. My recommendation to this council is when the audit is done, then you can reconsider the request for the $97,000. But give them an incentive to get the audit done. Otherwise, it's going to be the 90 days, maybe plus, who knows? Thank you.
Do we want to answer that or not?
Do you want me to?
I could answer it, or you can answer it.
We're talking about like 3 different things in one
Thank you.
item.
Thank you.
So let's start with the extension. The 90-day extension is for the 17-18 audit. This statement of conformance is verifying they completed their 16-17 audit, and therefore they were eligible during the 17-18 year to receive those funds. We have been updating staff, COG staff has been updating this council since April of 2018 that we knew this situation was coming. I think all the electeds and all the work they did to form the JPA has taken care of this. This will close out this account. There was a general fund loan, and the general fund had to eat some of the ineligible expenses that weren't covered by TDA. So I think these discussions have been going on for a while. We're not blindsided, so.
Ms. Raggio, you and I and a lot of other people know how much the county had to eat.
Oh, yeah.
And I appreciate the effort of our new Public Works Director
Yes.
and what he's doing, but this wasn't something he created.
No, it is not.
So-
We are cleaning up old messes.
Okay. Is there any further council comment? We have a motion to approve these allocation instructions and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 7-0. Agenda item number 10 is the council consideration and direction regarding a change to the monthly meeting time for the Council of Governments. I asked that this be agendized for both the council as a COG and for the council later on tonight as a transit agency. Specifically, I just want to make sure as a COG board, we, having now had experience of 5 months of meetings with the transit agency being slotted at a 6:30 time that has on occasion interrupted the COG meeting where we've had to suspend the COG meeting and reconvene after the transit meeting, that we still had a consensus among our board that this practice is working as a COG board. So as a COG board member, if you are still comfortable with the ability of having a separate board, although it's still ourselves, interrupt this meeting in order to host its meeting, I just want to ensure that we gave the COG board with its direction the ability to say yay, nay, change, or keep it as the COG board's perspective, it's okay, and move forward with that. So it's an opportunity for council comment about the meeting time of the transit agency interrupting the COG board meeting. Councilmember immunities.
I have a question for Jim. Are we still within the spirit of the public notice requirement if we say the meeting for whichever one, whether it be the Council of Governments or the transit agency, starts at 5:30, and that the next meeting will be immediately upon that one completing? Is that, well, we have as much as a 20 or 30-minute gap at times. Is that sufficient, and does that satisfy public notice?
No, I think you need to tell the public what time the meeting's going to begin.
Okay.
Otherwise, they could be on their way to the meeting and it's already started.
Okay.
We did change the introductory language on the agenda. It provides that the CTA meeting will begin at 6:30 or as soon thereafter as deemed convenient by the presiding officer. So you have some flexibility to start it later, but
So if COG ended it at 10 minutes after 6, we wouldn't have to sit there and wait the last 20 minutes, is what you're saying?
No, you would have to.
Yeah, that's what I was
You
wondering.
would.
That's
You
what
would have to.
wait.
What Jim is saying is, say we're in, I'm
if
sorry.
you're doing COG business at 6:30, you can continue with that, start the CTA meeting later on.
Yeah, but we have some flexibility if we're close to the end of the COG meeting and we're going through
Council
comments or
reports.
whatever, then we can continue past 6:30
And just close it.
and, yeah, and finish it off real quick and then go in and start it.
That's the case. I just don't think you can start.
It's just we can't start it early.
In addition, if we're in the middle of an agenda item at 6:30, that a presentation or whatever, we're not going to interrupt that presentation to convene the transit board. We'll wait until we're at least at the end of that agenda item as well. But I just want to make sure that the council, as a COG, is still comfortable with the practice of that, so that we're not having to go to a different night or a different time for the transit meeting and/or the COG meeting.
I'm the one that brought it up because I was just looking for a little more time efficiency, if it was possible. But if it doesn't satisfy the meeting notice, then I think we leave it the way it is.
Okay. Currently, I think we've had 2 COG meetings that have concluded more than 5 minutes in advance of the start of the 6:30 meeting. That is, it really just depended upon the COG's agenda. There's nothing that precludes us from saying that the practice itself is okay and having the transit meeting at 6 o'clock. And knowing that we'll always be interrupting the COG meeting, because I don't think we've had a half-hour meeting ever, or maybe one in the last number of years. It would interrupt the agenda sooner, but it would also eliminate that time differential in case we had a 45-minute or 50-minute COG meeting. And the opportunity is there if the intent of the COG board is to continue the practice of allowing the transit board to schedule its meeting at a set time during our meeting, and we'll suspend the COG board to have the transit board meeting. We could bump it up to 6 p.m. That would meet the requirement. We were telling the public specifically when we're going to start it, and I think we would be okay with that, and it would probably help with your efficiency concern.
Is a concern that
What I
we'd
am
be sitting around?
Well, the issue is that you've got staff here, and if they're cooling their heels for 20 minutes when they could be on their way home, if we just be a little more efficient time-wise. But if we can't satisfy the notice issue, then it's best to leave it the way it is.
Well, one solution is to consolidate the agendas. I think the Board of Supervisors used to do that, because the board sits as the governing body for a number of entities, and they're all listed on the same agenda and begin at the same time. You can do that, but then you end up merging the agendas, and that sort of eliminates the clarity of distinguishing between the two.
Yeah, we do that with the Air Pollution Control Board and
Right.
several other boards. We convene as that board and conduct that business on the item on the agenda, and then rest, and then reconvene as board supervisor.
Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility here. It's just, I don't think you can start the meeting early. That's the one thing I don't think you can do.
So with also that possibility though, so we could do it at 6, but we would have the COG meeting for sure interrupted because it'll never end by 6, right?
Most likely
Most
not.
likely.
I've never been on
And
a
so
COG.
it's to whether or not we'd want to go and just be sure, no, we're going to interrupt, or if we want to do it at 6:30, you know, sometimes we might have a time lapse.
We
I'm
also,
for keeping it the way it is for right now.
we also have on the transit board agenda, the ability to change the transit board meeting time. My intent on the COG discussion here is if we're amenable and still have the consensus that we want to keep them on the same night, basically starting the meetings at 5:30, that works best for everyone here. From what we've seen for the last 6 months is that the constituency that shows up at the meetings, with the one exception of the honoring of the transit operator last month, our public doesn't change. And we see that. So we're trying to be sensitive but also pragmatic here as well. So, okay, I think the consensus I'm seeing is that it's okay to continue having the transit meeting, interrupt the COG board meeting. When we have the transit meeting item, we'll actually determine the time we want to start that.
Do you simply want to poll to confirm your direction?
As I summarized it, is that the consensus of the COG? Councilmember Muniz?
Yes?
Councilmember Mills?
Yes?
Councilmember Catalano?
Yes.
Councilmember Tupin?
Yes.
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 Okay. All right then, I think we've got the clarity we needed to move this item forward. Thank you. Caltrans report. I don't see a Caltrans person here this evening. Council report. I'm not seeing any City of Angels here either. And it's not on our agenda, so we won't be asking for the city. So I will ask council members for their reports.
Nothing.
That's my
Count.
house. They're not on the agenda either.
County reports on the agenda?
It is
Yeah.
not.
I thought we decided that we were gonna do quarterly things. Correct.
Okay. It's not quarter then. December.
Okay, well, I've asked for Supervisor Muse decline, Supervisor Mills decline, Councilmember Catalano decline.
You want to
Councilmember,
say how happy is the opportunity to say how happy?
It's nice that I was reelected tonight. Appreciate that. Had to show a lot of grit to get on this council over the past couple of years, and I'm proud to be a part of this. One thing I will note is that the Blue Mountain Coalition for Youth and Families is hosting its holiday dinner on December 11th, and everybody is welcome to come. I know they're going to have at least 3 turkeys and a ham, and quite a bit of fixings on that, so all is welcome. And that's all I have to report.
This morning, the city had a city gates report, final report come out, so we had a workshop at the firehouse. There was quite a good group of public members that came and participated. We walked through steps on picking the top 6 priorities for the council, and starting after the first of the new year, when new council members are sworn in, we will be starting to dive more into those priorities. So it was a good exercise for the public, the council, and staff. It went longer than what we had anticipated, but it was a good dialogue to get us started, and it was a much needed dialogue that we have not had from all areas. Last week, community development, if you did not hear, it flooded about 8,000 gallons of water. So thanks to Bob Middleton and Debbie Pawnee, they were able to find a new location for community development. So staff is now located in the old Umpqua Bank in the Middleton Shopping Center. And right now, we're just going through the motions of assessing the damage and working with insurance. And while we're hoping a 60-day with everything, and it to be continued at this point. So, yeah. And that's it.
Good report.
Councilmember Tofinelli.
I have nothing to report at this time.
Okay. Councilmember Hubbard.
Well, just just, again, on the city gate this morning, I agree with Amanda that it was a very good opportunity to have our city start to get organized and develop our goals, priorities. It's something that we've been lacking. So I'm really looking forward. I enjoyed it thoroughly. It was great. And also, we had a parade, a Christmas parade and a wine hop on November 24th. And it was just jam-packed and people had a great time. And I just recommend next year y'all come because it's a really good event. Yeah, we were packed.
The guy with the fire coming out the top, he was told to tone it down because he was going to burn the,
Oh, above, the things above, yeah.
Yeah.
The lights. Yeah, it was great. That's good.
Well, thank you. Well, in the spirit of transportation, I want to encourage us to shop local. You want to reduce your driving? Don't drive out of the county. Support our local merchants, and I think that would be a message from transportation that would be applicable for transportation. I also wanted to say thank you to Melissa Eads. I did bump into her last night, and she is actually manning the C's candy booth at the Middleton Center this evening, so that's one of the reasons we don't have a city person here. But shop local, folks. It's a good thing. With that, we have staff reports.
I have nothing else to add to my staff report here, but I missed the opportunity to acknowledge Ms. Raggio here. She should get 100% of the credit on our audit this year being on time and with no findings. While I would love to take credit for my management, but it was 100% her hard work, and she worked with the bookkeeper, 8 hours a day sometimes, so she did a lot of work, and I'm sure she might take a day off in the next couple weeks. But that's it.
I believe that concludes our meeting, so we will adjourn till February 6th at 5:30 for the COG. Thank you.
No?
Meeting for the Calaveras Transit Agency. Our first item is the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial and will be acted upon by the council at one time without discussion. And council members that are interested in party may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for further discussion. We have one item, the approval of the regular minutes from last month. Is there any council wishing to pull the meeting minute agenda item? Any public comment on the, okay. Do we have a motion to approve the?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Muniz, seconded by Councilmember Herman. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're 7-0. Next item is public comment. Public comment shall be limited to 5 minutes per person and limited to items which are in the subject matter jurisdiction of the council and not on the posted agenda. Do we have any public comment for the Calaveras Transit Agency this evening? Seeing none. Our third item is the presentation of the data management software implementation. And this item is by Amber Collins.
All right, thank you. At the July Transit Board meeting, the CTA Board awarded a contract to McGuire Management Consultancy for the development of a custom data management software system. We're here tonight because that system has been fully implemented, and we've done training with paratransit services staff. And so I thought it'd just be good to have Phil here and his team to provide just a brief presentation on kind of what this system is and what it will do for our agency. So I'll hand it over to Phil.
Thanks, Amber. Nice to be back here, everyone, members of the council. It's been a while since I've been here. And just a couple of quick comments before we actually begin the presentation. Of course, we had high expectations for this project. It offers, I think, tremendous promise for the overall management of the system and hopefully to simplify some of the activities that have been part of routine operations, data collection by drivers on the buses and that sort of thing. And I would also then say, by way of introduction to my colleague, that software development projects. So I think I may have mentioned some of this back at the time of the contract award, but we have successfully worked on a wide variety of custom software projects. This offered an interesting challenge here. I would say at the outset seemed kind of like a simple idea. It increased in complexity dramatically as we started to get into the nuts and bolts of this. And Marilyn and the team of colleagues she worked with in the actual development process, I thought did a tremendous job putting it together. So I'm going to turn this over to Marilyn, and she will kind of walk you through some of the features of the system and how it's being used today. And I'll answer the questions later.
Thank you all for having me here.
Yeah, get the mic over by you. Thank you.
How's that? I appreciate being here. I had not been to Calaveras County before this summer and had the opportunity to come and meet with Amber and her team and the Paratransit Services team over the summer a couple of times. You live in a beautiful place. I'm from Seattle, and this is different down here, but it is a beautiful place, and the people I've met with have just been terrific, whether it's in a professional nature interaction or just meeting people at the grocery store. Everybody was incredibly friendly and welcoming, and that makes a project like this even more fun than just having the creative ability to put together a database like this. So I'm very appreciative of that. The software application that we developed for the transit program here is called Zoom. And the idea was to put together something that would make it easier for drivers to collect data and provide additional opportunities for paratransit services to be able to provide oversight and look at the data in real time. And we've done that in a variety of ways, which I will outline for you as we go on through this presentation tonight. We also wanted to make it easier just to look at data in a variety of ways and analyze it. So there's a number of standard reports that are available in the system, and there are also numerous ways to create ad hoc reports. And because there's so much data in the system now and moving forward, it really is possible to say, I wonder how many bike riders there are who put bikes on at Government Center. Let me run that report, and in 2 seconds we can have that information available to you. Or Paratransit can, or Amber staff can. It is very easy to come up with these things that are just really, what about that? Let's see what it says in the data, and we'll be able to give you that data very quickly, depending on what the context of your interest is or what you want to do. As you're looking forward to doing route planning, you'll really be able to see what are the times that people are getting on stops at various locations. All of that is very easy to look at here because it's all collected every day by the drivers in the field, and then it's available to the staff both at Calaveras Transit and at Paratransit to run any reports or to provide oversight in any ways. What you see up on the board right now is the home screen. This is where the office staff comes in every day. I'm going to walk you through the office version of this, and then I'll show you the iPads as well, and we'll do some comparisons as we go. But the interface is very easy to use and very consistent, so it doesn't take a lot of training to be comfortable enough to maneuver through the system. When we open this up every morning, you'll see that there's certain key indicators that are available both for month to date and for fiscal year to date. So right now what we have up there are the statistics for December, and that shows you the number of service hours, the number of service miles, the number of boardings, and the fare box revenue, the estimated fare box revenue to date. That's not actual. That number is actually calculated on the number of cash boardings and zone fares that are collected based on the information that we collect on the boardings by fare type, which is a very complex, very detailed process that I'll show you. So this information is always there, and then of course we have all the navigation. The bigger buttons that you see on screen are just shortcuts to certain functions within the system, and then we have the nav bar at the top, and this is home, obviously. We also have operations, These are layouts that are designed to help paratransit services in their daily supervision of the program. And that is departures in real time show every departure from every stop as soon as the drivers leave that stop. They simply push a button on their iPad, that information is captured and it shows up in the office automatically. So Scott or Rosie can just sit in the office and see throughout the day every stop and when the vehicles are departing, which is also a good way just to make sure that vehicles are where they are. And when you put this up with Geotab, where you're seeing Geotab and the vehicles on screen, the two of them give you a really complete picture of what's happening throughout the day with every vehicle on the road. We also have manifests. This is all based on manifests. So every day manifests are created. We have default settings for every schedule on every route. And the dispatch has the ability to modify those. So if it's a different driver because of vacation or someone calls out sick, you can change that information. It's all very easy to modify within the dispatch. One of the new features that we've added here is called Riders. And this is a specific module that's designed to allow the paratransit staff to very easily add on-demand trips and deviation trips. Instead of doing that and having to type a rider's name every time, we've created profiles for all of the riders who use these services, and that includes their name, their contact information, their pickup address, and it also includes what we call favorite locations. These are the places that they typically go. Most riders who use either on-demand or deviation services go to the same places over and over and over. So now all you have to do is say, I want it, Maryland, I'm calling up, I need to go to St. Mart. And instead of having to type all that information, all I'm doing is picking from drop-down lists, and it takes very little time. You add the date, you add the time, you pick your rider, you pick the locations, and you're done. And that automatically then is added to the manifest. And very quick process. We also have, as I said, standard reports. There are 8 standard reports that are available either on screen or can be exported to Excel. They can be printed or saved as PDFs in detailed or summary versions. And then there are also on ad hoc reports, as I said. Our administration section includes everything that's needed to create the manifest. It's creating routes, it's creating stops, it's putting routes and stops together, and they can then be added to a schedule. This is not something that's done every day, but it's done once a year, or when you have service changes, you're going to build new routes and you're going to add new stops. We have geocoded all of the stops, so it's easy to identify where they are, and that helps with the Geotab locating when the vehicles are stopped at stops, and we can gather information back from that. So this was an intriguing and challenging process, because in many cases everybody knows where the stops are. I heard that a lot. People just know where to go, but when you have to actually tag those someplace, it becomes a little bit trickier. And so that was one of the things we worked on over the summer, was just making sure that the stop locations matched what was on the public schedules and where the buses actually stopped. And we kind of organized that information more. The last thing we have in the nav bar here is just a help screen or a help pop-up, and that's anytime someone is on a screen, they don't remember how to run a report or they don't remember how to do something, they can check with help, and there are tips there for this particular layout or how to get the information that they need or how to input the information. So this nav bar appears across all of the layouts that we're going to see tonight. And again, it's just a standard interface, very easy to navigate through. As I said, there are different versions of the data that are in here. On the left side of the screen, you'll see something called manifest details. And that's where we've taken all of our route stop information and we've put it with a schedule. So we know that this vehicle needs to leave at a certain time, and the first stop is, this is an can assign 72. They can assign the iPads individually or the fuel cards. Any of those things are modifiable. For on-demand routes, maybe they don't have to go to the first stop here, so the actual start time for this particular manifest on this particular day needs to be changed. All of those are changeable if need be. If not, if everything is good, it's always what's standard. They can just go ahead and publish this, and that's done with a click of the button. It takes literally, seconds to publish this, and when it's published, then it appears on the iPad, and that's the iPad layout that you see on the right. Drivers sign in using their username and password, and they can only see their route for this particular day. They're not going to get mixed up and confused with somebody else's route. They're going to see their route, and the overview tells them, you should be Dean, so if you're not seeing Dean's name, Dean, you better go back and, check that something's wrong here. So Dean should only see Dean. He sees his schedule clock in. He knows what vehicle's been assigned, what fuel card, what schedule he's on today, the scheduled departure time. If he has lunch, his lunch time will appear here. So everything is on this one page to let him know what he's supposed to be doing for the day. And then when he's ready to go, he's done his pre-check in the morning, he's on the vehicle, he's got his iPad in the holder, and he's ready to go. Then he clicks go to first stop, and this will automatically take him to his first stop of the day. And as he goes through, his stops are going to be in order, and that includes the deviations and any on-demand trips that he has. So he's just moving through sequentially from layout to layout. One of the key things here is tracking the departures and where the vehicles are. This shows you, again, two layouts here. On the left side is departures, and it has every stop in the system for the day. It tells you what schedule they're on, what the route and the run is, what the stop name is, what the scheduled departure time is from that stop, and what the actual departure time is. The actual departure time is entered automatically into the system as soon as the driver leaves the stop and pushes that next stop button. It is time-stamped, and virtually you can sit and watch this just roll through the system and watch it on screen and say, okay, this stop, this stop, this stop, and you can sort all of that for all of your stops throughout the day by the departure time. And it makes it very easy for dispatch to see where the drivers are. If there's a delay, they can talk to the driver and say, you should have been leaving, what's going on. If there's a reason there was a traffic accident, there's actually a field in the departures layout where they can indicate that. So if there's any kind of comment that needs to be added about the service delivery at this particular stop for this particular time, it's just added automatically. You'll see on the iPad side lots of information, and this is how the drivers collect fare information. We collect it by cash or pass or ticket, and every time you push one of those buttons, whether it's a cash regular boarding, that will count towards the total people. You can see at the bottom it says board, deboard, and zone, deboard, and that's where all of the tracking information for this particular stop is collected. When you push regular one, it'll add one to the boarding. If you push deboard, it will add one to deboard. If you have a zone, it will track that. All of this information is calculated and is reported back instantaneously to dispatch. So again, they could watch if they wanted all of the boarding information to this. We also have additional information that we track, and I'll show you that in a little bit, but it is about the bike boardings, lift boardings, if there are transfers, any other categories of boardings. So we have the fares, and we also have the additional information that we call it. These are some of the other layouts that the drivers see. This gives them a list of all of the stops. They can just say, if I just want to check and make sure, especially if I have a deviation, where does that fall in? This just allows them to see all of the stops in chronological order throughout the day. transfers that are used. We track free if it's a child or a personal care attendant and a companion, or a complimentary. And one of the things we've just added is the capability for on-demand or deviation requests to indicate whether that trip was actually performed or whether it was a no-show. There are cases where a trip is scheduled, the vehicle is sent out, the rider isn't available. There wasn't a way really in the past to collect that information easily and then to track it. So now we have the capability to see if there are people who are chronically no-showing trips, and that allows paratransit to work with that person to make sure that we're not getting into a situation like that, because that's tying up the vehicle, that's an expense, and we want to make sure that those situations are tracked. So now we can look at the rider history and say this person booked 10 trips last month and only took one of them. This is something that needs to be addressed, so we can collect that information as well. For fueling, the drivers enter fueling when they get back at the end of their shift, and they go to the fueling station. By clicking the start button, it'll timestamp when they begin fueling. When they're done fueling, they've done all their paperwork, they're ready to return to the yard, they hit end, it'll timestamp that. They enter the number of gallons, and so now we have a record of every vehicle fueling throughout the month, and we can look at that by date or by vehicle and know how long it took to fuel those vehicles and how many gallons were purchased for every vehicle during the month. And we can look at this not at the end of the month, but every day. We can look at that information on a daily basis to make sure it's being entered accurately. We can run reports mid-cycle, whatever. We also track odometer readings to help with the service miles. So depart the yard, the first stop, last stop, and return to yard, all of those odometer readings are collected, and then the service miles, deadhead miles, and total miles are calculated every day seamlessly. And again, we can look at that by route, by vehicle, or by date. These are some of the summary reports that are for printing. You can see they're very straightforward. So here, this is information for November 29th. It tells you that total, there were 135 boardings and 142 deboardings. That would probably be something that somebody might want to take a look at, but it also tells you by route what the boarding numbers were. And we can also look at this by vehicle. There's other ways to slice the data here. Fuel purchase summary tells you for that same day, there was a total of 137.2 gallons, and it tells you which vehicles had which number of gallons. Estimated revenue by fare type for that day was $71. Cash discount accounted for $13, and cash regular was $58 in fares. No zone fares that day. And then here's the vehicle mileage summary report. Again, showing by vehicle what the total miles were for the day, what the service miles were, and what deadhead miles were. And this is easy to run every day as the vehicles are coming back, or you can run it monthly or quarterly. You can define your time periods however you want. Lastly, this is just the geotab screen, and this was from earlier today. That again shows where the vehicles are on the road, and it's a very easy way for dispatch to know where they are. Geotab will actually show if there are any slowdowns or construction or accidents that need to be aware. That can be seen on this too. So when you're using Geotab in conjunction with Zoom, it really gives you a very complete real-time view of what's going on with the system. You're meanwhile collecting all of the data that you need operationally to make sure your on-time performance is according to contract, where the drivers are, fuel, miles, hours, all of that is here. And for most of this, it really is a matter of defining the period that you want to look at data, clicking a button, and running the reports. It'll generate these reports, and then you can export the data, or you can print it, or you can just review it. this is easy, I know I can do this. Even people who were not familiar with iPads or didn't have a smartphone to use, once they worked through this, they got it. And the nice thing was that there were drivers who were very comfortable with this, who were then able to provide support and assistance to the other people who might need a little additional assistance. We were able to work with the paratransit services staff, work with dispatch one-on-one, both Scott and Rosie, to show them the capabilities. And we provided ongoing support for the entire month of November and moving forward. We'll be there too, making final or adjusting certain things that have been brought up. It'd be easier if we did this, fine, we'll do that, or what about this report, we'll do that. So we continue to provide support and make refinements as they're brought up, both by Calaveras Transit and by the paratransit services staff. Are there any questions?
I have some thoughts here. Can this system be their time card?
I'm sorry, can it be?
Can this system be their time card where they are not manually punching a card? Because they're punching in to start their day, they're punching out to end their day.
There's certainly the capability to have that information. It's not set up to tie into the vendor's payroll system, but we're collecting that information. So it's possible, but this wasn't designed to replace the time card system that's currently in use.
Now, the other piece to that is that you mentioned meal breaks or lunch breaks.
Yes.
And that has to be completed by the 5th hour. And so is there a way to accommodate that time window in their route so that they know they've got to take their break at a certain, or they have
Yes.
a meal break done by a certain point?
For the lunches, that is entered into the schedule. So when we do schedule 1 that starts at 5:45, then lunches at 8:40, as they come to that time point on their schedule and they hit the next stop button, it'll take them to lunch.
Thank you.
And
Good.
when they're done, it'll take them back on the route. So you can't miss lunch because it's just part of
The route.
process that you work through.
It's
Yes.
part of the route. I've worked that system before. The question too then is breaks.
Yes.
Says you have to have mandatory breaks every 4 hours. Can they be built into the system as well?
They can be. There are not any breaks at this time that I'm aware of, but that hasn't been brought up to us, but that certainly would function in the same way that lunch would.
I wouldn't want to get caught in an audit, and not have those 10-minute breaks done in the first 4 hours kind of thing.
If I might comment really quick.
Yeah.
The way breaks are often typically done in a fixed route operation like this is they are accumulated at the recovery point at the end of the line. And so
Okay.
you don't stop mid-route and take a 10-minute break. You go to Columbia College and you get off the bus for whatever time it is till the bus schedule turns around and heads back the other way. That's how the break times are typically accumulated in transit.
Yeah, it's not required that they actually leave the vehicle. What we're just simply saying is that their activity on the route as a functioning driver stops for that period of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll see that there is a scheduled arrival time for every stop as well as a scheduled departure time.
Uh-huh.
And so that shows up in the system
Would there-
and accounts for as that still said.
Thank you. Would there be a way to, on this particular screen, to include the speed at which those vehicles are traveling?
If you roll over, if you hover over the vehicle, it'll tell you that.
Okay.
So it doesn't appear unless you have, in effect, selected that vehicle, but you can do that. And then you can obviously run speed reports that will tell you if there have been any,
Deviations?
yes.
Yes.
Good word, yes.
Or if they, for instance, they're in their route, they're running that from point A to point B, and at some point between the two, it stops, you get no notifications, but something happened. Is there a way that flags up automatically? Or could it be set up to flag?
Yes, there's all kinds of ways to get notifications. I'm getting right now notifications every time a vehicle leaves a stop, so my inbox is packed with all these notifications. I don't recommend that really for everybody.
No, I'm more concerned about a vehicle accident in which it hasn't been reported to you, but you're aware that they're not making their next stop timeline.
Yes.
And so therefore, can a text message go to the route manager or somebody to indicate this vehicle is now no longer in its profile?
There are many ways to
Okay,
That is very,
great.
very possibly set up.
I had mine set up to the point where if you got into the wrong fuel pump, I had a text message to say you were there. So these can really get very detailed if you want them to. It's just the level at which you're capable of handling the information. And I don't want our system to be information overload to where it's not functional anymore because there's just too much there. So,
As we've had discussions about various features of this or Zoom, it's important to use the data that's there.
correct.
This stuff will collect, especially geotech's going to collect data all the time. It's collecting in real time. If you never look at it or use it, it's useless. And so it's a matter of everybody using this as a management tool to understand that, oh yeah, I'm getting really critical information here in real time. And I can not only monitor my system, but I can make decisions on the fly if I have to. You know, what do I do if for an accident out on the freeway or on the highway or something like that, a vehicle's gonna be 30 minutes late? You know, do I wanna make a decision to put a different vehicle out there? Or, you know, there are all kinds of things you can do, but you have to use the data, and certainly it's best in real time.
I mean, you heard the story about don't mess with my dots. And I've lived that life. So I'm just simply saying is that a dashboard is a good tool as long as the information is functional and usable for the person looking at it.
Yes.
So we have to be very careful that we don't give our route manager too much to deal with, but
Well-
only give her the criticals when she needs them in the form of text messages, flags, or whatever, to say, this is something you really got to pay attention to and it needs immediate intervention.
There's information that you need to look at instantaneously if it's an accident or on a daily basis if it's something. And some data that we collect, you might only look at once a year for planning purposes. The important thing is that the data is in the system and is available so that, you know, when you're deciding to change your service or add new service, you can go back and say, we've got this information. I didn't think I needed to know, you know, how many bike users there were at this particular stop or what time of day we had this particular need, but we've got all of that in there, and it's just about how you think of the context, and then you can move forward. So I think that with Zoom and with Geotab, you have information that will answer questions that you haven't even thought of. So.
Excellent. Thank you for your response.
Any further council questions? I was just curious on the, when you do the fuel stop, you said you collect the amount of gallons. Would you also want to collect the odometer reading at that point so you could get an instantaneous miles per gallon on an ongoing basis by vehicle?
That's certainly possible to do. It wasn't one of the things that we were asked to provide, but it's certainly possible to get that information. So.
John, to explain why that's critical, and you're right, is because you can start to see whether or not a maintenance issue is starting to come up on that vehicle long before it flags a check engine light, for instance. So mileage is an important part of this component.
What was that?
Other comments?
Any other comments?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are we going to see a report back on this then in 6 months to?
Well, we won't probably see a report back on the specific software program,
No.
but this will develop the semi-annual and
Reports that
annual
we're
reports
looking
for us
for.
and our monthly reports. Actually, we didn't really discuss this in this presentation, but our monthly report template will change a little bit based on the additional data that we'll be able to get from here. So you'll see a little bit more in your monthly reports after this month.
You could just download the dashboard to us every month and then we could just look at the summaries that way.
Okay. Do you guys need to disband over there, or is there more to your presentation?
But she's along for the ride now.
Oh, I see, okay. I'm sorry, I don't
Okay,
want
next one.
Participating in other of your discussion items.
Okay. So we are able to move to item number 4 now?
Yeah.
Okay. Agenda item number 4 is the presentation of the revised Calaveras Transit branding concepts and board direction. Ms. Collins.
All right, thank you. As the board's aware, we brought this presentation, or a presentation, to the last board meeting. We awarded a contract in August to Transit Marketing and Selena Barlow, who provided the presentation at the last meeting. The contract award was for branding plan and marketing services. And as we've discussed, there's 2 phases to this. And phase 1 is the branding effort, which is our discussion tonight. And phase 2 is really implementation of the new brand and a marketing campaign and tools. So we're currently in phase 1. Let's see if this works. There we go. So just to get on the same page, kind of why are we doing this? Why rebrand? The main issues to address through this process, really the use of the system is an all-time low. I mean, this statistic here is absolutely shocking. The last 10 years, our ridership has decreased by almost nearly 60%. And to me, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of reasons. There's the economy, fuel prices, things change in our demographics in the county. But a statistic this great and this large really tells you we need to change the way that we're doing business. We need to adjust what we're doing and respond to the changing demands. The second issue here is obviously awareness and visibility of services. There's clearly a lack of awareness of what services we provide. Calaveras Transit provides obviously fixed route service, but there's also deviation services and flag stops. So there's a lot to this system. It's a rural transit system that does more than just one thing. So that's part of awareness. And then visibility of our services. And then image and perception of Calaveras Transit. How are we seen by other public agencies and the public and the communities here? Some of the things we've learned and we heard, and obviously through past planning efforts, really the perception of Calaveras Transit here in the county is, it's a public and social service. It's very government. It's slow to change. It's slow to respond. It's sometimes inconvenient. You only take it when you have no other choice. Or seniors take it. Obviously, these are, I'm saying negative things. There's clearly positive things to Calaveras Transit and to the riders who ride it. I mean, clearly the drivers, they love the drivers. The customer service is great. But we clearly need to do more to change the image and perception of transit to really get users by choice to use the system. So some of the opportunities, why are we doing this now? Well, we have quite a few opportunities at the forefront here. We're a new agency, so we have the opportunity to establish a brand new image. We are an independent agency that's looking at new ways of doing business. So we're very adaptable and able to change quickly. Marketing, there's already a need for a robust marketing effort, regardless of the branding. So how can we take the need for marketing and just really add to it through this branding effort? And really, currently the marketing that's occurred in transit in the last couple of years has been very minimal. So this year we really do need to invest in marketing regardless of this effort. The other one is to complement and really package the changes that we're making and to really communicate visually to the public that this is a new agency, we're changing the way we're doing business, and there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes. And I want to assure kind of the board here that we're looking at everything. We're doing a 360 review of everything. We're checking all of the boxes, and this is just one little piece of this. We're evaluating all of our internal efficiencies. We're evaluating the operations contract. We're evaluating our capital program, our vehicle replacement program. We're evaluating all technology that is out there that can improve our system, that can improve public relations, that can improve the service for our customers. And one of that you saw tonight with the software program. Other things that we're looking at is mobile ticketing. There's a lot of different businesses out there doing that, and a lot of transit agencies taking advantage of that. The other thing is a customer interface, an app that provides real time. Now that we have the Geo tab, now how can we turn that on the customer side so that they can see where the vehicles are and when they're getting to the bus stops. The other side is Google Transit. We need to get on Google Transit, so when somebody's trying to plan a trip, we are on there and they can see that there's this service. We got grant funds for the short range transit plan. and long-range planning efforts for the coordinated plan. So we'll be getting kicked off here this spring on that effort, which will look at a 5-year service plan for Calaveras Transit. So that'll take, this last September, we implemented some really minor service changes and schedule changes just to address some technical issues and respond to some customer complaints. But the long-range efforts will do a more thorough job of surveying, evaluating demographics, and really changing the types of services that we provide, and looking at partnership opportunities with nonprofit organizations, and what are the things we can do to serve, some of the underserved areas. And I can keep going, but I won't belabor that point. And then obviously another opportunity is appealing to different target markets. Really in the youth, they are one of our biggest market of transit riderships. I think when we did our short-range transit plan last, the college ridership was about 50% of our ridership. So I think that's really a good opportunity for us to really appeal to the youth population. And the youth population obviously have different expectations of customer service. So we definitely need to change and respond to that. So what is a brand? I think Selena kind of went through these with you last time. Obviously, name and a logo are the core pieces to a brand. Your organization's clothing, that's that first impression that people get of your organization. It really relays your personality of your organization and the style. The brand's supposed to identify and not explain. And, some examples of this that are immediately come to my mind is Uber. If anybody can tell me what the definition of Uber is, I had to Google that. And so it has nothing to do with transportation. But we immediately recognize Uber and what they do just from their brand and their branding. And they're not even in our county, but we all know what they do. And I said Google as well. That's another company, you know exactly what they do, but it doesn't explain what they do through their name. And then be memorable. Simple, well-designed, and consistent. So what's our brand here at Calaveras Transit? When we're speaking brand, we don't just mean logo. I mean, this is going to be applied consistently throughout everything that we do. So this is on the bus stop signs, this is on the buses, this is on our website, all the brochures and pamphlets that we distribute. So the brand touches every type of material or information that we distribute to the public. So it's not just, I know last time when we reviewed the brands, we were just showing kind of the buses, but the brand's going to be applied to everything that, all of our assets that we have. So this process was kind of a 3-step process. We started with stakeholder interviews with some city and county representatives on really the feedback of the image and perception of Calaveras Transit and how we might improve, and some ideas of how we might improve that perception. We then went back and had kind of an internal branding workshop with Paratransit Services staff and development of kind of some name concepts based on that feedback that we received. And then the third step was kind of review of the different design concepts and additional working groups and kind of informal surveys of riders and people on their thoughts. And so from that feedback, really the core of the brand objectives that we kept in mind throughout this whole process is, one, updating the agency's image with a brand that is friendlier and less government. And those were really key to us, the friendlier image and less government. Provide a fresh look for the system on the vehicles, but while still allowing for advertising on the buses, because that was a program we implemented this year. And then creating enhanced passenger information to make the system more accessible, easier to use, and more convenient. So keeping those core objectives in mind, we went through a pretty thorough look and evaluation of different naming options, including the current Calaveras Transit name. And really went through the pros and cons of that and used the marketing expertise on and the feedback from our stakeholders on what are some negative connotations to the names, what are some positive. But most important is, how sustainable and vital is the name for a long term. So we looked at focus on local history, which we all know is like the Hopper, the Rush, the 49er Flyer. We looked at focus on transportation, which is Calaveras Transit, or like the T. But then we looked at focus on benefit of transit. And since we're trying to adapt and change to more of a user-based focus for the transit system, and keeping those objectives in mind, we really got stuck on the focus of the benefit of transit, and led us to Calaveras Connect, which we discussed and reviewed last time. But we felt like this really strongly conveyed what transit does, particularly in Calaveras, because if you don't have a car, you can't get in between our communities. And each community is somewhat isolated on its own. So we really felt like Calaveras Connect was really simple to understand, that this really connects our communities and connects you to jobs, connects you to shopping or whatever you need to get connected to in the other communities. So obviously it conveys what transit does, has positive connotations. The word connect is very positive. We couldn't think of a negative connotation to connect. It connects you to people, things, places. Continued use of Calaveras to define the service area, nice alliteration. Connect is very short. And we did keep in mind there's the resource connection, so we went with connect instead of connection. And then it works well in a lot of taglines and headlines. We connect you to life, we connect you to your Columbia College connection, or catch the connect. Connecting Calaveras communities. So we thought there was really a lot we could do with this brand. So logos and vehicle applications. We reviewed and brought to you two concepts at the last meeting, and we received support from the majority of the board to move forward. But the board did have some suggestions, and the board had some concerns that we felt needed to be addressed. So we went back and we revised the two alternatives you saw, but we also introduced two additional alternatives that we think addresses some of the key concerns that you brought up at the last meeting. So we'll go through each alternative here, and I know you saw two of them, so just bear with me, and then we can have the discussion. So alternative one, you saw this last time. The reason this was such a strong symbol is because it somewhat conveys motion with the offset of the C's there. It's very clean, it's modern, it's fresh, it's bright. And something we heard from you in terms of the Calaveras Connect name, it needs some kind of a tagline or qualifier to let people know it's public transit. So we came up with the idea of putting public transit connects you. To let people know this is a public transit service and system. And I think it works well in the logo and on all the applications. And these are just the different ways this logo could be used on different materials. This is, the bus concept that we reviewed last time. Obviously, it has the public transit connects you there on the side under the logo. Very bold, bright. Clean, and then we did add, because that was one comment too, is the logo on the hood. So we did add that for your consideration, and maybe people on big trucks might see it, or waiting for at the bus stop.
I like that.
Yeah, yeah, people in the air will know. So these are different applications of the brand that that has potential. So on the rider guide and brochures. This is, what it could look like. And I think I've already received a comment, thanks to Cynthia Lawrence has helped me out, and she's kind of went out and asked writers and non-writers too about their feedback on these. And that one with the road, somebody had mentioned throwing a bus in there. So I think that was maybe a good comment. This is just a summary of this brand concept and how it would be applied on the buses and the brochures. Alternative 2 here is the connect, I guess we're calling the connect the dots alternative. I think the strong points about this, it's youthful, fun, it's bright, the play on the logo of the Connect the Dots, and we added the Public Transit Connects You here, which it works well in this logo as well. What you could do with this logo on the bus, I think the dot in the corner is kind of a play on the Connect the Dots, and makes a nice bold kind of appearance, and you could put phone number or website in there. One thing I didn't point out in the last one that we're ensuring we're doing is leaving room for advertising. So our advertising program, we agreed to have the half of the sides on each side available and the full back. So we made sure all of these designs allowed for that space. So we are considering that and leaving space for advertising. Some things you can do with the kind of the Connect the Dots thing is associated with kind of the route maps, and use it consistently throughout the different materials. So this is kind of a summary of this brand, and different materials. Alternative 3, so this one you did not review at the last meeting. This one has, this one's simple, but it does speak to the service area. It has kind of a landscape within this big C. It's bright and fresh, but a nice, clean, and simple. And then again, the public transit connects you. Very similar bus design, but just changing out the logo here. And then what some of the brochures could look like. I think the landscape obviously speaks to the communities here. This is a summary of this brand. And then alternative 4 here is similar to the last brand, but it uses landscape, but it's more prominent. It's a more prominent logo, more flexible, because you could put this horizontally. And then I think on the vehicle, it's clearly more identifiable, and it pops this logo, and you can see it's on the hood, and again, room for advertising. And then some ideas of what this could look like on some materials. And this is a summary of this brand. So for you, we have 4 concepts and 4 branding ideas. The 2 we brought to you last time, and the last 2 I feel like really responded to some of your comments and concerns, and some things we heard from our stakeholders. So we are looking for your direction on the selection of a brand and to proceed with full implementation of this brand. And I think D has gotten the most positive response and feedback from different stakeholders, but I'm open to hearing what the council, if you have any questions or want to pull, but we can provide a staff recommendation as well.
Well, let's start out with the council. Mr. Communities, comments, thoughts?
I think D is the cleanest.
D is in David.
I think, yes, I think it's the cleanest, most succinct, and I like the tagline. Thank you.
Councilmember Mills.
Yeah, I agree with D. I would like to add some additional thoughts here. And that is can you name a single Fortune 500 company when they weren't in a doldrum that didn't rebrand? There isn't one. I'll give you an example too. How well people attach to brands. Everybody knows what this is? Everybody calls it a Kleenex, but that's a brand. And what we need to understand is that I will give you the airlines as a good example of that. When Delta, American Airlines, and all of those others either joined forces or brought themselves together with other umbrella organizations, the immediate next step was to rebrand and put a fresh look. And if we're going to connect with the market that we're trying to reach, then we need to have them identify with us. In other words, they have to see what it is that we are as being something they want to participate in. If they see us as stodgy and old, that's all the riders you're going to get is stodgy and old people, because they connect with stodgy and old. I don't mean to be age-related here, but the market that you're trying to go after has to see you as part of their life. And it's important to understand that connection. Sorry. But that's why I think branding is important. How do I want to put a side bet on this? Because if you don't do this, you're going to continue down the pattern that we're in now. And a whole lot of ridership is not going to change. You're only going to attract new riders to something that they feel they can connect with. And they need to know what that is. And if they try it the first time and it's a good experience, they'll try it again. If they try it the first time and it's a bad experience, they probably will not come back. You only get one shot. So if having the geotab available on cell phones for people so they can see where their vehicles are, to me that is so critical. So critical. Because it's part of their life. You don't want to wipe their life out sitting at a bus stop when they've got other things that they want to do. So we have to be able to pull this all together under a common theme. And if we're aiming that half of our market is young people, then I'm really curious to know is what will the young people want to see? What do they want to participate in? What do they want to be a part of? Because the last thing they want to say is, I took the bus. No, they don't want to even say it. Let's just talk about participate in it. So I hope I helped to make a case here that rebranding is critical.
Councilmember Catalano?
I like letter C. And I agree with Mr. Mills with the application of being able to use your phone so that you can reach and see where the bus is. And that was something I think we discussed a while back. I'm not really sure what happened, that maybe our service is better now, cell phone services. Is that why that's available now?
Yes,
It's
in
getting
fact,
better in the foothills.
we have 16 new broadband towers going up in the next 12 months in Calaveras County, so yes.
The reason I picked letter C, I don't know, it's just plain, it's just easy. I don't know. The C looks good.
Ms.
Me?
Wondorf?
I like D.
D's and David?
I like the last one. I'm still attached to the B just because of the creativity that we can do with that.
With the dots.
Yeah, with the dots. But I can see some of, with the C being white, kind of a clean slate, we can still put those ideas into that. So I guess I waver between the two, but I would go behind D if that would be the majority.
B or D?
D. I like the way that D we could do certain things, like change the dot to like a grape or a frog for frog stomp, or grape for grape stomp, and kind of, or do something with lumberjack days. It made it fun, but I think we can still do the same. I'm guessing we could do the same thing with the D, with that white being in the background, and kind of cater it to the community in the county.
Yeah, I think D obviously lends itself to some creativity as well. You know, it doesn't have to be always a landscape in the background. It could be a solid color, or the C, you know, could be changed out. So I agree.
Mr. Tofinelli?
I have no comment.
Ms. Herman?
Let's see, I think I would go with D. I see
Which one?
creativity, D.
D's and
I
David?
see creativity, but simplicity. So,
Okay. I will say that the way the C is on the bus, I actually like C better. The way the bus is laid out with the two C's, one on the door and one underneath the windows, whereas the D alternative, it was a much bigger logo on the window and nothing on the door. But I hear what the council's saying, and I think the direction's leaning towards D as in David to move forward. I don't know if the council thinks anything about having a logo on the door or not. When you look at the two photographs here on 24 versus 28, if you like it on the door or having the door plain, maybe it opens up another advertising opportunity.
I don't see it critical to having it on the door. It's a duplication of a design.
Yeah.
That would be like putting two American Airlines tabs on the same side of a
Okay.
Airbus. You know, it just doesn't make sense.
Okay. And a bigger, bolder C in the front, it's not taken away from advertising.
No.
So it definitely gets that logo itself out there.
Yeah, we
Like
could
that,
use that door. We could use the door.
5 here, I think, for option D as in David. Will we be okay with that? I think,
You okay
seeing head nods, that sounds okay. I think that's the direction we're going to encourage you to go with. And I do want to thank you for listening to us and putting in the public transit connects you. I think that clearly gets that message across. This is public transit, but that with the fresh logo and the fresh color in the buses, they won't be mistaken for PG&E. That was the blue concern I had when I saw it last month. But with the branding that on the hood and on the sides, this is not a PG&E bus, and it's pretty clear. So I think D as in David is our direction.
One last comment.
Fire away.
And you guys are finalizing this and putting it all together. I'd like to keep in mind that the emphasis, I'd like to see more emphasis on the advertising, the revenue generated that's non-ridership, because obviously we've got a loss in ridership, we've got a loss in population that has a direct role, I'm sure, in the ridership. But the point being is that if we can generate more revenue, then there's less,
Pressure, fare box recovery.
exactly.
Well, thank you. I think D was the staff recommendation, and Phil warned me not to bring C and D because that might split the vote because they're so similar, but I'm happy to get that support and that direction. So from here, we'll full steam ahead on full implementation of this brand.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Amber and staff. All right. Item number 5 is a minute order approving the Calaveras Transit Agency fiscal year 18-19 operations budget amendment number 1. Ms. Reggio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to bring this item forward. We had a couple of updates with revenue estimates. So if you want to look at the attachment on 5A,
Page 14.
is it 13? I think
Page 13.
13.
13. One of the items in the previously approved budget, object code 4712, which was classified as other revenue, was replaced, and the auditor controller created a specific object code 4327, SB1 state of good repair. So, it shows the change as 60,000, but that was identified previously in object code 4712. So the net difference was only like $480. The other item that we received an updated estimate on was STA. That was due to SB1. We've recognized increased revenue. So the previous, at the final budget, we approved 322, and we were notified, and you can see the allocation revision attached in this packet. They anticipate 380,000. At the bottom portion of the spreadsheet, we identified, we increased communications. This was for the new tablets that are in the buses at $7,500 for the year. And then we increased office expense by $2,000. If you read in the staff report under the fiscal impact, I identified the new anticipated revenue does not equal the expense identified. So there is a $50,000 difference that we'll be receiving more revenue. Staff anticipates coming back to the council in February and March and talking about a new policy for capital vehicle replacement. Thank you, Amber. Did you you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. We're talking about a difference between a reserve and a contingency.
Yes.
And ultimately, if we are not doing set-asides and trying to put an amortization schedule in place, when it comes time for us to do replacements, we're going to be borrowing. And I would just assume that we start anticipating a little bit of a set-aside. And if it's 6%, we need to establish what policy, what percentage policy that we would like to have for our reserves here. And I know that the state, with the county and the cities, require a certain level. And I'm not saying that we have to do that, but I think if we start down that road, at least we'll have that direction beginning to be established. And it's an important direction.
Yes, and we need to start having this discussion. We bought multiple buses under PTMI SCA all at the same time, within 2 to 3 years of each other. So we'll need to start looking at how we're going to be replacing this fleet.
Would it be better also, as we start to anticipate replacements, to be looking at trying to spread them out over a longer period? So we're not bulk purchasing multiples. We're buying one this year, one 2 years from now, or whatever, and start to get into a CIP plan pattern.
Yeah.
That more reflects, so that we're always keeping the fleet freshened up as it goes.
Yeah, and we'll bring these items and options and just, back for council discussion.
Yeah, and we at the staff level too, when we did our transit asset management plan, worked really closely with paratransit services staff, their maintenance staff, and Phil here, on a vehicle replacement schedule that staggers those replacements by 1 or 2 vehicles a year as opposed to all 4 or 5, because we don't have that PTMICA program anymore or Calaveras program to purchase buses. So we don't have that big chunk of change for capital purchases. And also working with paratransit maintenance staff on how they're running the buses. So if we get a new bus, for it to not just sit in the yard and all the other buses all depreciate at the same amount of time, to start entering that into service to extend the miles of the other older buses. Anyways, sorry.
And to further that discussion, without getting into an agenda item all by itself, is that
Too young for a senior moment.
is that there are hard miles and there's easy miles. It really, the route is going to determine that, and if we're putting the same vehicle on the hard routes all the time, well, that's going to shorten its life, even if it's a younger bus. So we have to really think carefully on how we balance that total fleet use so that we get the best out of each vehicle before it's turned in.
Well, this item was needing a motion to approve the operations budget amendment number 1. Do we have a motion to?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Munides, second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Catalano. I don't see any public comment being requested. Any further council comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 7-0. Agenda item number 6, council consideration and direction regarding the Calaveras Transit Agency meeting time. This is a follow-up on what we did with the COG meeting, in that, as you even saw this evening, we had a dead time, as it were, between the conclusion of our COG meeting, when they run a little shorter than an hour, and the desire in trying to have a set fixed start time for Calaveras Transit to be respectful of those public who wants to come and get to just a transit meeting. Because we're doing so many changes with the transit, we didn't know what we were going to see. And as I did comment earlier, we don't see a lot of public coming to our transit agency meeting, with the one exception that we had with the honoring of the transit operator who found that lady. So having said that, and we threw out an option of potentially maybe moving the transit agency meeting start time to 6 p.m., which would then pretty much ensure we wouldn't have a dead time, but it would definitely break up our COG meeting. As a COG board, we seemed amenable to having the process still be on a Wednesday evening, as part of our COG meeting being suspended and reconvened. Do you have, as a board, from the transit perspective, a desire to see the meeting change time to 6, keep it at 6:30, propose another alternative? And Amber, I stepped on your toe here, I think, but. Council?
You want a poll on it?
I'm happy to hear a comment or a recommendation.
I'd leave it as it is.
So I have a question. If you want to change what we just did, the COG,
The COG meeting direction was that it was, as a COG board,
so are
to
we
be
gonna
open to...
fight with the COG board? I
No,
don't
no,
know where
no.
we're going here.
I'll go.
Sorry, but it doesn't make sense to
What,
me.
what I wanted to find as a COG board member was whether or not, as a COG board, we wanted to continue to see our meeting interrupted or suspended.
I'll
The
go back.
direction was pretty clear. It was okay to keep a transit meeting with a potential interruption to our COG meeting. That was the direction we received from, as a COG board. Now, as a transit board, and still respecting that we have a public and we're also, trying to keep staff without losing time ourselves, being as efficient as possible, there's nothing that precludes us from suggesting that we change our time to 6 p.m. In order to ensure that we have as minimal dead time as possible, because the likelihood of having a half-hour COG meeting is pretty unlikely, even with quarterly reports now. So I guess that's the opening comment that I'm making here. Do we want to keep it at 6:30? Do you want to propose a different time?
I would move keep it at 6:30.
I would suggest keeping it at the same time unless something significant changes over the next year.
It can be revisited, it's just,
I just brought it up because there's a pregnant pause there and you have staff that are on the clock that would like to go home. And if there was a way to trim that down and not have that wasted time, great. If there's not, with meeting notices and regulations, then let's live with it the way it is.
Okay. Well, I'm getting a good sense here that just leave it be. The status quo is working pretty well, and maybe we need to pad our COG meeting a little bit.
I think also over time, giving it more time, we'll see. If we have a repeated dead time, then I believe we'll kind of get to the point where, hey, this is too much. 10, 15 minutes, we're just sitting around. We're socializing, which is nice, but still, efficiency-wise. That's what I think. Over time, we'll get there.
Okay, so I'm sensing the direction then. I'm seeing the consensus being that leave it as is. 6:30 is still a good time for trans agency. Okay. The Calaveras Transit Agency Monthly Performance Report. Ms. Collins.
This is our standard monthly performance report, and as I indicated, this will change a bit, and will be a standard report out of the Zoom software, so it'll take way less staff time on Paratransit's end and our end here at the staff level. I think I'll point out October, that's when we did the Wild West Fest, right, Cynthia? Yeah. So October, you see a little bump, a pretty significant bump there, but 600, and I think 650 of it is the ridership of Wild West Fest, so that was good service that we provided. But I think that's kind of the main thing to point out in last month's report. And to note here too, I know that we're at the December COG meeting, but we usually get our paratransit services reports at the 10th of the month, so I can only give you October because I don't have November's yet, but with the Zoom software, that'll allow us to get kind of more immediate data.
at mid-year, could we see last year's numbers against this year's, just to know where we're hovering?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's our intent. The monthly reports are just to give you real-time, constant data, and then the mid-year and year-end reports will compare to the previous.
The problem is we switched to this red line through purple line in April of 2018, so we can't.
How do you compare that? No, I would be looking at total ridership, not specifically by line.
Okay.
And there's similarities, just only a few of the lines were adjusted a little bit, and the names were changed, but a lot stayed pretty similar, so we can make some good comparisons.
And make some notes when you made the change to the route schedules too, so we can draw where there's a comparison between the schedule changes and ridership as well.
Okay.
I think it's improved it, to tell you the truth. I've been getting some good reaction out there.
Well, even factoring 650 in the Wild West Fest, we've gone from an average of about 3,000 to 4,000. And I'm glad to see that.
Yeah.
So good job, paratransit and staff. You guys are making some positive changes already. I think it's helping.
But I will note, this is the busy season, right, the fall, when most kids are going to school. So we will see, I'm anticipating a drop in November, December, January, just because it's the winter months.
Okay. Agenda number 8, the Paratransit Operations Report.
Cynthia Lawrence, Paratransit Services, Contract Manager for Calaveras Transit. Well, Amber sort of stole my thunder there. We had, our average passenger per day in October is 165, which is nice, but that 650 did bump that number up a little bit. We did have 100% on-time performance. And our on-time performance, which is nice, it's really anything under 15 minutes,
Deviation.
you know, running 15 minutes late or down, I should say. Anything over that is considered late. But most of our drivers do a really good job at keeping on time, if not catching up with their time. Because at the end of the route, you have 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes, things like that. And we tried to build that into it because we know that we have deviations and flag downs, which can really bog a route down. So I'm real happy with that. Our safety and training, we did do the iPad training for Zoom, and the drivers really received it well. And they're still working at it. A few little glitches on their end, but we're working through that. Actually, Marilyn just showed me a neat little program where I can look in there and see what's going on. And so now we can print it out and say, hey, you're missing this, remember to do it here, and so on. So learning curves. Our outreach events area, of course, the Wild West Fest, we provided an extra shuttle. And then we also did the World Mart transportation, which was really nice because World Mart, I think we had over 54 passengers, and the whole thing combined, I think, was like 656. And then the resource connection, this is my time of the year where I get an opportunity to really give back to the community. My drivers are part of that as well. And so October, we partnered with the Resource Connection. We started discussing our Stuff the Bus program, and then the Santa's Express boxes. And those are those boxes you see at the government center. You'll see them at the different businesses and, of course, the grocery stores. And they are really understaffed currently at the food bank. And so we took on that little item for them and took all those boxes out and got that going. And then, of course, we had our Stuff the Bus this November. And the last one was December 3rd, but we got rained out. So that was unfortunate. So, and I just want to go on record to let you know, my drivers, they donate their time. They're not paid for it. We don't make them do it, you know, like, oh, your next raise is dependent on that, you know. I'm just kidding. They do it out of their hearts. They want to be part of the community, and I really cherish that and appreciate that. And last but not least, our team member of the month, I really wanted to start bringing forth my staff, my drivers. I think it's really important that you know the people behind the work. Scott McClure, he's our dispatcher, he's our admin guy. He is a wealth of information. He's been with this system for 18 years. He started back as a part-time driver, and he has worked up in the ranks. He's an excellent, like I said, an excellent source of information. If you want to know about the history of Calaveras Transit, call Scott. He can tell you what you need to know. The other is he really helped out with the Zoom. He's our computer guy, and he took on that Zoom and he, asked the questions and found some glitches. And Marilyn was all thank you, and they're having a great time. So, I really just appreciate his service. So, I just wanted to bring that for you. I should have a picture. Never even put the picture.
Well, next time you need to include it in your report.
I thought I sent it. Okay. Anyways, you guys have any questions?
You did have your shelter cleaned at McCollum
Oh,
Hill by
yes.
one of your drivers, because I drove by and watched him do it.
Yes, yeah, I have a couple drivers that'll clean up but I have my maintenance guy that takes care of the vehicles. If he has free time, he goes out and takes care of our shelters for us. So he did 4 shelters in October, and he did another 3, I think, in this month.
November, and you want to tell him that I noticed him doing it and appreciated it.
Oh, okay.
That's
I
at
will.
26 and 12, and 12.
Right. We also have a rider, and I really appreciate her. She cleans that bus stop a lot too. She comes there and she'll pick up trash and she'll even empty the trash for us. She's just a sweetheart. So we really appreciate her.
Cynthia, I have one question. As we're getting into the winter hours, as it were,
Yes.
is it possible that you could get a report on which lights work or don't work? Is it possible for the drivers to go out on their evening routes after 5:30 and just double check the lights working, or make a note that we get
Are you
those
talking
taken?
about on the shelters?
The
or
shelter and the little push button ones, just make sure those are all in good shape.
Yes, I went out, actually, I think the last board meeting, they mentioned the one at Vista Del Lago, and that one does work. I went out there that night and checked it. It's working. It's dim, but you have to remember that because you have all that lighting around,
It looks dim.
it almost just negates it, yeah.
From a distance, it looks like it's not on, but it is on, because I checked it.
Did you? Yeah, so I went
It's
right
my
out there. I
desk,
said,
kind
what?
But it's on.
In fact, I think it's the shelter one that doesn't light up much, and it's because of where the solar panel is in relationship to the street light. So, yeah. But we'll go through that and have all the drivers, the evening drivers, note that for us. Great idea. So, anything else? Well, I wish
Thank
you
you.
all a Merry
Merry
Christmas
Christmas.
and a Happy New Year.
You too.
Thank you.
Staff reports.
I was going to say I had nothing to report, but I do remember our chair requesting information from me on our advertising program, which I did not bring with me, but that is well kicked off. We've sold all the backs of the buses and a few of the sides, so we have still some more sides to sell. But I will, and as a promise, at the February meeting, I'll provide a staff report similar to the COG board, just letting you know what's going on with our different programs and things we're doing with the transit program, and give you a clear update on the advertising.
Thank you, John. All right.
The January meeting.
No, February. So that concludes our December meeting. We do meet again on February 6th at 6:30 here in this chamber. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.